great to see you, Senator. It's great to see you.
Walden Kirsch, Your Honor, welcome to my podcast. I figured that we would begin by explaining why you call me Senator. And
Yes, that would make sense,
Honor.
wouldn't it, Senator? Sure, let's do it. So, way back at the dawn of time, I'm thinking in the mid-90s sometime, Senator Ron Wyden was in town for a news conference of some kind. And as you may recall, you were sent on to cover him because you had finished doing the morning show and some kind of a morning news conference with Senator Ron Wyden and the rest of the press. So you went down dutifully and covered Senator Ron Wyden's press conference. I don't recall the topic. Anyway, next day, the Oregonian front page above the fold, nice big picture, Senator Ron Wyden and you and other reporters. There was only one slightly weird thing. So the caption said, Senator Ron Wyden, blah, blah, blah. There was only one weird thing. You, Senator, were the most prominent individual in the picture. You could barely see Mr. Wyden. So obviously you were Senator, and henceforth, what is your name, Carl? I've always called you Senator.
No, that's funny because I don't remember that specific.
Oh, I remember that. And henceforth, since you sort of retaliated, since I was calling you Senator for some period of time, you decided, well, I've got to have an honorific also. So you bestowed on me honor, your honor, although I'm never been mistaken for a judge.
Oh, I'm glad we said it that way because I did not remember the specific. I just thought they were terms of endearment.
Oh, no. There's no endearment here. No, you are Senator Carl Click.
Oh, that's the best part of this podcast is sharing that stuff.
Serendipity, yeah.
Yeah, I remember throughout the 90s and the 2000s before you left KGW, I was always there in the morning. And by the way, hi to your wife just walked by.
She just got off there. Channel 12.
That's right.
Yeah.
From home. You would always arrive early, and we would always have discussions that were theoretical.
Philosophical. Yeah, I agree. Yeah.
And I was always, I felt as though I was always yielding to your honor because of the great wisdom you always had in those conversations.
No. It was a mutual trading of perspectives on the world before everybody else got in the newsroom, and we were just kind of sliding into the day, right?
Yeah, and they were invigorating. They would be very serious about news coverage and things like that, or they would be as trivial as. I remember once a consultant filled out some kind of report on all of us, all the reporters, and he called you disheveled.
Oh, well, I hope so.
Which for you is a term of endearment.
Exactly. I'd much rather be disheveled than your honor.
Yeah, but then we decided. Then the whole discussion of the morning was, if you can be disheveled, can you be shoveled?
Shoveled. Of course, that's right. I forgot about that conversation. That's right, shoveled. Yeah, you're shoveled. I'm disheveled, Carl. Okay. You're always shoveled.
Well, I've been doing shoveling out here with the snow.
Oh, okay. No shoveling here. I think we also talked a lot, as I recall, in those early morning conversations about risk, because the news business, we were always blowing up the likelihood of bad things happening. Remember, you and I had an ongoing conversation about how we cover risk in our business, and my view, and I think we aligned in this, is that we in news business made low risk events sound way riskier than they really are, and alternatively, high risk behaviors seem very low risk. That was one of our ongoing conversational threads, I recall. Huh?
Yeah, I've had this discussion with many people. There is always, I wouldn't say erring, but we would always lean to the a little bit of exaggeration of what possibly could happen. Snowstorms would fit into that category.
Yeah.
And I that was the nature of the beast. In some of those situations, I didn't feel bad, like when snowstorms or bad winter weather was coming, we would say this could possibly happen. We're going to be ready to cover it if it does.
Right.
And then probably 2 out of 3 times nothing happened and everybody's laughing at us standing out there.
Well, except, so the footnote, you're right. The footnote that is if everybody was called in to cover snow, and if there was no snow where we expected it, our jobs collectively was to go find snow.
Yeah.
Go find snow. You're in at 4 o'clock. Go find the snow somewhere.
Go as far and high. Big surprise. We're up at Timberline and there's snow. It's probably not going to affect your drive to work.
Exactly.
But on the other hand, when those events happened, and they did, like the windstorm of 95 in December and the flood of 96, we did a damn good job.
I agree. Nothing to be ashamed of.
And I remember the flood of '96 was when KGW first really uh, grasped the use of the helicopter, which our news director Mike Roush brought into the market, and we dominated the coverage because of the visuals that we were able to create there, just because of some technology of a gyroscope type mount for the camera that gave you steady pictures. Remember?
It was an amazing bit of technology. I recall I did during the floods of '96. I did many live shots. I was down, I think, in Clackamas County, and Larry, or you, I think Larry, you were up in the helicopter, and we did live shots talking back and forth between me on the ground, the hip waders and what, and then you or Larry, 1,000 feet up in the helicopter, going back and forth. It was really pretty amazing, actually.
Great memory, because I remember that too. It was Larry in the helicopter, and I was on the anchor desk with Brenda. And we were having this three-way conversation between the desk, and the field, and the air. And one of the reasons I know that is I did not fly in that helicopter.
Oh, why not?
I'll tell you, I flew in a helicopter for news twice.
Oh, wow, really?
Once was really early on in the early '80s. They needed to get me down to Salem to meet a photographer.
So they dragged you by the heels into the helicopter.
So the helicopter was the only transportation. And then one weekend I was the on-call reporter, and I came in, and snow was a story, and they wanted the helicopter up. There were only 2 reporters, and they had already sent somebody to Timberline, and so I was it. But I don't like helicopters. I don't like carnival rides. And here's the thing: is I always wanted the helicopter's #1 job was to keep me in the air. But I always felt the #1 job was to cover the news. No matter what, even if the fuel tank was going down.
See, I'll tell you though, I love flying a helicopter. I never had any problems with it, in part because I felt safer in a rotary wing aircraft than a fixed wing. And here's the reason why. Many years ago, back in the '80s, I think, I did a story on the tuna fishing industry off the Oregon coast, right? And the big tuna boats actually often have helicopters that go out and spot the tuna schools and go out and fish for them, right? Well, here's what's interesting is that a helicopter, most people don't realize this, if the engine dies, if the pilot is worth his name, her name, can auto-rotate and set down gentle as a leaf. If the engine dies in your helicopter, you do not crash. If you're doing things right, you just set down. Whereas in a fixed wing, you're in big doo-doo. You might be able to glide, but you better find a runway. But a helicopter, and that's why helicopter pilots always want to make sure they got some forward momentum. They hate to hover, because if they hover, then they have no forward momentum. They got to land there. But if they've got some forward momentum, there's some places they can go. So anyway, I've always felt happy in a helicopter.
That is why Walden Kirsch, Your Honor, was such a great reporter. Is your knowledge of just it is. I always thought I needed to know a little bit about a lot of things to be a good reporter. You know a lot about everything.
No, I know nothing about everything. I'm a mile wide and an angstrom deep.
Let's see. You grew up mostly in the D.C. area, am I right?
I grew up in Washington, D.C., and then came out to Oregon in 1974 to go to Reed College. And I pretty much went away to grad school and then came back.
And did you go? You reported before you came to Portland. Were you you were in the Midwest someplace?
Yeah,
right?
I was very lucky. So I went to grad school, went to Northwestern, got a master's degree in journalism. Got my first job in Sioux Falls, South Dakota, CBS affiliate there, an excellent station. Excellent station. Was there for 8 months, and then I spent the rest of my career at KGW.
Wow. And so were you in 1984 into Portland?
I joined in 1983 at KGW. Yeah.
Okay, because I was January '83.
Okay, I was like October of '83.
Yeah, Pat Cruz and Lori Van Kirk came in the spring of '83.
Sounds about right.
You were right after it. So
yeah.
And then you stayed until when?
2000, 17 years.
Yeah.
I'm nothing compared to you. You have 30, right? To your name?
I was 22 at KGW.
22. Okay, and of course at KGW.
And then 9 at KTU.
Yeah, right. Yeah, no. So I bailed after only 17 years.
And just briefly, unfortunately, you lost your dad here in last summer. And I didn't know your father, but in some of the memorials about him, he was just a really obviously intelligent, effective engineer, and he was a pioneer in digital transmission of images, right?
Yeah, he is credited. Look at Wikipedia, is credited with the first scanned digitally created image, which happened to be little, diaper-clad, drooling Walden at age 6 months or 3 months or whatever. So, yeah, if you look up my dad's name in Wikipedia, is the story there. He had a very interesting career. He was a polymath. He knew a lot about a lot of things, did a bunch of things, and he was a great dad.
See, your dad, a lot about a lot of things.
That's fair. So apple don't fall, right?
So here, the fun thing about this podcast, at least my gig, is what I'm saying, Walden, is I don't do a lot of research. I just go off the top of my head, and if I'm wrong, I'm wrong.
You know what that reminds me of, Carl. I got to interrupt you there. Not George Will. Ted Koppel was famous for, and people asked him, "How do you prepare for your interviews?" People asked Ted Koppel, one of the greatest interviewers of all time. He said, "I just prepare the first question." And everything else flows, which is kind of what we're doing here.
Well, I've prepared a long list of topics.
For you. Okay. All right.
You're, just the helicopter, the tuna story. That's really indicative. You didn't have a beat. You covered so many things, and they always were, at the risk of the wrong word, kind of quirky.
Well, I preferred that. I preferred, like you kind of correctly put your finger on it, I preferred to be a generalist. In fact, even now today, I'm a generalist. I mean, there's a lot to be said, obviously, for people who really are deeply knowledgeable in one area and really dig in, and which is wonderful. Journalism wouldn't be that without people who've got that kind of discipline. But I've always preferred to kind of range broadly and tell stories wherever I happen to find them, which I've always enjoyed doing, still enjoy doing today.
And you were a wonderful storyteller.
Well, you were too. You are too, Carl.
Thank you. But I think I wish a lot of reporters could they kind of grow up in whatever atmosphere they learn from. I was lucky enough to learn from people like John Tuttle.
Sure, of course. Superior storyteller.
And there's a part of you in that ability. You have to. There's your perspective on the world, which isn't to say you're biased left or right.
Yeah, that's right.
You see different things, and then the ability to work with a photographer to show those things and write those things. Those abilities make just these unique storytelling opportunities, and I think you just had so many of them.
Well, that's kind of you, but I mean, you also pointed out something really important. That is one thing that I've always enjoyed doing. You were very good at this, and other John Tuttle, other people who are good. You always kind of didn't just sort of slap the pictures on the story, but you told the story through the pictures, and you let the pictures. I always said, let the tail wag the dog. If we've got a great picture, let's let the picture tell the story versus my bullying my way through a narrative and papering it with B-roll. So that the people who tell the best stories on TV are those who kind of let the tail wag the dog, right?
And I believe that still goes on.
Yes.
It just is not the predominant way of telling news, especially at the local level.
Yeah, well, you have to work harder at it. You have to, and as I know, and nowadays, reporters are a lot more stressed and pressed, to move quickly, and to get the best pictures takes time. And, you may have to wait for an hour or two or three to get the shot you want. So that's costs money, it costs time, so it's harder to do now, right?
Yeah, and you're being required by your job.
Absolutely. To shovel a beast.
Live tweet.
Feed the beast. Feed the beast. It's interesting you say, Carl, because Marilyn's still in there at Channel 12, right? And she's a hardworking young lady. She is producing far more content than I ever did. I recall when I joined a year or two later, we were all up in arms because we would have to do something not just for the 5 o'clock, but maybe something for the noon, maybe 2 things per day. Well, now, I mean, my wife is just feeding the beast between tweets and Facebook and multiple live shots, and multiple stories. It's a radically different world from the one you and I, earned our wings at doing.
Yeah, I remember that discussion in a union contract meeting where it was voiced that we earn more money because we're producing more stuff because they added the 4 o'clock newscast.
Right.
And I guess that's logical, but I looked at it as they're paying me to be here from. The 8 hours with no lunch because we never got lunch. They're paying me to be here, and I should be producing whatever I can whenever they need to.
There's always that push-pull because reporters obviously want to tell great stories. In order to tell a great story, it takes a little more time. But to your argument, I mean, companies hired me for X hours. I should do what they need me to do. Right?
Which I think there tended to be a balance. If Walden Kirsch or Carl Flick was working on a story that we knew needed the time, needed the visual, maybe you needed an extra day to edit it. I always felt like I would want to crank away, if I was on the other side of that, I want to crank out an extra VO byte or something.
Sure.
To give my colleague time to put together that, that
Fair
piece
enough.
that's really going to distinguish us.
Fair enough. Totally agree.
And we had, we mentioned John Tuttle, but, John Canton.
Another excellent reporter.
Would do that. And, Casey Cowan, when she was doing entertainment, would put together some great things. There were great storytellers all around.
Was it you or Tim Daly who ran into the Wind Devil down in the valley? Was that Tim, or that was you? That was a classic story, one of my favorites of all time. Carl Click sprinting through a wheat field or whatever it was at that point to get into a Wind Devil. That was classic.
So now what you've done here, Walden, is I'm gonna have to edit this conversation and put in a clip. Put in a clip from that story.
You better.
Okay, in the interest of science, we're gonna go inside the dust devil and find out what it's really like in there. Here we go! We're going inside the dust devil now! I'm going with it! Is it dangerous? It's dirty!
You better.
It exists on YouTube. Maybe I'll just put the list.
Good.
The link.
Put it in there. Yeah.
Yeah. That was...
And while you're at it, since you mentioned John Tuttle, see if you can find the singing bridge that he and Milt Ritter did. That was another classic story.
The best thing about the bridge is that the noise of your tires and the steel grating changes with your speed. If you drive slowly, you get one sound. If you drive faster, you get another. And if you stand on the bridge and think about that, you start to get ideas. It's now the world's largest musical instrument.
I'm serious. I was the reporter I was because I got to work with John Tuttle and other people, Neil Rosenau when I first got there.
Sure.
And you mentioned Milt Ritter, one of our photographers, who was an artist at covering news. And, we can go on. Tim Herman, Brian Robertson, Kurt Austin,
Kevin Feltz, Terra Renneria. These are all great
storytellers.
storytellers.
Yes. And I'll leave them all out. I leave some out because I just can't list how great they were at helping tell the stories that we told.
That's a good point also, and that is that when we did our best work, it was always, and this isn't just a platitude or a Hallmark card thing, it was always a partnership between reporter and photographer. The best, most successful stories and the most successful journalists, reporters, photographers are the people who truly collaborated and wove the story together as a team.
I absolutely believe that, and at some point I figured that out, and I made it my mission that whenever anybody came up and said, "Carl, what a great story," I would say, "I shot it with this person."
Yep, exactly.
Because they were, if not 50%, probably more capable or more behind the fact that it was a good story.
It's funny you say a little bit of dirty laundry there. For years, I liked to credit my photographers as part of my sign-off. I felt it was important. We had a news director whose name I won't necessarily need to mention, we can probably figure out, who didn't like that, told me stop doing it. Don't mention photography. Why do you still know who that is? And I kept doing it because I felt, like you just said, that the photographer was every bit as, maybe arguably more important than me in producing the final piece.
And what I argued for, and I think I did it a few times, especially on bigger pieces that were is putting a chyron on the air that said photographer XYZ.
Exactly.
Well, speaking of that news director who'll go nameless. That was one of the
one who chased me out of the building. You mean?
Well, I don't know if we're talking about the same person because we just got news directors.
I'll have to tell you about the one who chased me out of the building.
But let's start with the one that we as a union got fired.
Yes, that was the one who chased me out of the building. Actually.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
He doesn't need to be named. I'm not even sure if we can be sued for people that are no longer with us. I worked for, I think I counted like 7 or 8 news directors over 30 some years. But we had a couple of years there at KGW where it was a hostile work environment because of the news director who was
Yeah.
He was a big man. He was boisterous.
Yep.
He was, I mean.
Well, he was a harasser, and the kinds of things that today would be immediately cause for instant termination. People look the other way. In retrospect, it's awful, terrible.
And I mean, I don't know if he was mentally unstable. Fair.
Sure.
Yeah, but so a couple of things. Here's what I remember. He told one of a female reporter, who's a mom, couldn't come into work because her child was sick, which is a legitimate use of sick time.
Sure, of course.
And he screamed out loud. He never said anything softly, you know, no. He, out loud, "I'm going to have to hire barren women from now on." That
it's astonishing how far behind we were and how far we've come. I mean, today that's just laughably preposterous. But the fact that somebody could say that in a management position in front of a bunch of journalists, this would have been the 1990s,
early 90s, yeah.
Unbelievable, astonishing, right?
And the other one, which I think is the best one, is because something happened on a weekend that didn't go right. Somebody didn't make the right decision. And on weekends, you know, skeleton's crew, usually you're younger producers who are not real experienced. And I'll tell you, Bob Kearns was working on the desk, and Bob was an experienced journalist.
Good desk guy.
Yeah. And so Bob and this reporter producer made a decision about coverage, and it didn't go the way the news director wanted. And he spent the next day typing out this like 2-page description of what had happened, why it was wrong, and all this kind of stuff. And at the end, the last paragraph, and I think I got rid of it, but I had a copy of it. It said, "So because of all this, I have no option but to take you out and shoot you." That's exactly what he said. And I remember, Walden, our union attorney, Gene Mechanic, read that. And I remember him looking at it going, "I can't believe somebody took this out of the typewriter and went, yeah, that's exactly what I want to say."
Astonishing.
And that went on over and over. I think we had a kind of a secret union meeting with the reporter the afternoon. And the grievances of that from our lawyer went to the station. They made him go to some anger management. And he came back and it didn't work.
It's all right.
And then he was eventually let go.
Yes, correct.
And I remember coming into the newsroom when that news had happened, and I just embraced you like, I mean, there were tears in my eyes because it had been such an awful place to work. So,
over the years, I think that we did have we had some really bad apples, but we had a great bunch of people who we worked with, you know, teammates and colleagues and friends.
Absolutely.
So, all good.
So along the lines of the things that you could do then, but you can't do now.
Oh, okay.
Let's talk about your coverage of Senator Bob Packwood.
Oh yeah, sure. Yeah, I covered that whole debacle. Yeah. I became very good friends, not with both Senator Packwood and Elaine Franklin, who was the chief of staff, and we eventually, you know, as you recall, the whole denouement of how that story progressed and unfolded and so on, but many years later, I ran into Elaine, who was his, you know, very aggressive and very highly competent,
chief staff.
Chief staff. I ran into her on an airplane, I don't know, some years later, and we had a very nice conversation, and it was like nothing had ever happened, and but things had happened.
Well, the story in the 90s was that he was accused of sexual harassment, inappropriate behavior by many women on his staff.
Well, and also Oregonian reporter Bobby Ulrich, right?
Yeah,
that was the one she was the one who sort of first disclosed the ongoing issue, right?
And I mean, and it was pretty aggressively and graphic about grabbing women. Again, I don't know if we can be sued on a podcast by
it's a matter of public record.
Senator Packwood's estate, but and forcefully kissing women.
Yeah, exactly.
And so, I mean, we covered the heck out of that. I think, did he eventually get censured by the Senate?
Ooh, I should remember, but I don't, Carl. I'm sorry. I forgot how that resolved itself.
But I do remember at some point, you know, he was a DC guy. He very rarely at that time came back to Oregon because it's not a great place for him to come. But I remember him coming back and having a fundraising event or an event where he was the speaker. And both you and I were there. I mean, it was such a big event. We took 2 reporters and 2 cameras.
Right.
And I remember he called you out specifically.
I remember that. It was uncomfortable. I remember that. I did not feel comfortable. Yeah. He pointed, and he had some not less than charitable things to say in front of a large group of people. It was
exactly. I mean, very not unlike our former president, who at rallies would point to the press and say they're doing that thing. And I was really proud of you because I knew you were uncomfortable as hell. I mean, usually we're behind the scenes, and then here's this United States senator calling you out for basically reporting what was, as we learned, factual. I think he took issue with the fact that maybe in one of your stories you said sexual harassment, and he was only kissing people, and he didn't think kissing was sexual or whatever.
I didn't recall exactly what his beef was, but I remember that occasion. Yeah.
But I was proud of you, Walden, because you stood there in a very uncomfortable situation, and you said, "Senator, I stand by my story."
Okay, well, I'm glad I said that. I don't recall that part.
And I
thank
think
you.
I think you had to say it a couple times because he wouldn't back down. But I mean, so I was very proud to be your colleague at that point, because
that's kind of you.
Yeah, and in hindsight, those were accusations, but they all turned out to be true, and I think there were settlements and all that kind of stuff.
Yes, correct. Yeah, true.
But again, can you imagine any of that, even close to that behavior these days?
Being swept under the rug? No.
Yeah.
No. That kind of behavior would immediately be surfaced and dealt with. Yep, absolutely. Yep, times have changed in a good way, I have to say.
So now you got to tell about getting chased out the newsroom.
Oh, so yeah, the same news director we were talking about, he wanted me to go do a story on something or other that I don't even recall the topic, but he wanted me to go to collect from in downtown Portland a bunch of MOS, man on the street, MOS, right? Well, I both love and hate MOS. MOS is okay for me to sprinkle in occasionally, but with man on the street, you can prove anything. You can get people to say anything you want, right? MOS to me is the cheapest thing a reporter can do, because
if you had a news story and you went out and
you want people angry, you can get them angry. You want them, you pick your. So anyway, I objected.
Bring back 4 interviews of people that are pissed off, and then you can say to the audience, "Look, the world's going. They hate it."
Exactly. To me, it's the cheapest. Anyway, so I didn't want to do a damn MOS story, but this news director said, "Go do an MOS story." So I said, "All right, fine, I'll go do an MOS story." And I came back, and I put it on the air. And what I had done is I went with my photographer down to the park blocks, and I interviewed nothing but bums out like on park benches, drooling, drunk. That was all the MOS, just a bunch of, literally passed out bums on benches instead of man on the street. And the piece aired. And he, of course, didn't know that was going to be the story. And as soon as it aired, he came roaring out of his office, just beet red. He's a big guy, and just started thundering at me. And I saw what was coming, so I beat-feeded out, and he came chasing after me, and he chased me out of the building. So our relationship was not a particularly good one.
How was the next day?
We had a chat in his office that was, as I recall, also not particularly collegial. But not long afterwards, as you just pointed out, he went bye-bye. So
well,
all good.
I may have told you this story before, and I'll share it because I think it's interesting. I might have been the reason he got fired. In fact, I think he might be. He had the first thing he did when he came. I hope people listening to this podcast enjoy this behind-the-scenes news. I love it. The first thing he did when he came to our newsroom was he created a file cabinet and had a file with everybody's name.
Oh yeah.
And anytime you did anything wrong, like interview bums from MOS, he would type out this thing and put it in his file. So he had leverage if he needed to get rid of it.
Sure. Yeah, I remember that.
Sometimes those things would end up in your actual personnel file.
Exactly right.
So one day I went down to HR and I just said, I want to look at my file because I'm not quite sure what this guy's put in there.
You're right.
And sure enough, I found something he'd put in there that I had actually explained with a rebuttal or, hey, this is exactly what happened or whatever. And that wasn't with his description. And I said to the HR person, I said, I refuted this. I have a letter of explanation and it's not in here. It should be in here. And she goes, yeah, you're right. It should be. So I'll go down and talk to him and get it. And I said, no, don't you dare go down there and talk to him and use my name.
Right.
If you do,
there'll be another one. There'll be another letter in the file.
And at that time, Walden, he had already was broaching the subject of taking me off the morning news.
Right. Yeah.
He wanted to get me off.
Yeah.
And I know that if I was presented in that situation, I'd be on his list, and I was gone.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah.
And anyway, so I said, do not do that. You do not know what we're going through down there in that newsroom with this guy.
Right.
And if you do this, this will happen.
Yeah.
Well, guess what? 30 minutes later,
Uh-oh.
out of his office, I hear, click, get in here. So I walk in, and the HR director is sitting there next to me.
Oh, Lord.
She's white as a ghost.
Yeah.
Because she had gone down there anyway, because she knew that was a violation of the company's policy, and she needed to fix it or wanted to fix it. And he just dramatically said, Miss blah 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 says, I don't want to say her name, said your explanation is not in your file. And he turns around, and he grabs it, and he goes here, and he gives it to the woman. Says, "Is that okay now?" So I left.
Piece of work. I think I'd call that guy a piece of work, right?
I left. I came back. He called me back in and started the motion of taking me off the news program. And I was devastated.
Yeah.
And then walking down the hallway, I passed her in the hallway. And she, again, was whiter than a ghost. And I said, well, now you know what we go through every day. And because I knew he screwed her over big time. He needed to, keep it in confidence. And you remember what I told you would happen if you brought my name?
It did.
It's happening. Yeah. I think 2 days later he was fired, because I think
there we go.
The HR woman went up and said, this guy is a time bomb.
Yeah. Goes around, comes around. So yep.
What I remember, I thought this happened to you. Remember when we had Oprah Winfrey as the lead into the news?
Of course, yeah. I remember Oprah in my ear every day at 4:59. Yeah.
Yeah, I think actually we put her at 3 to 4, and then we had the 4 o'clock news or whatever.
Yeah.
So one of the strategies for that was whatever Oprah's story was. We need to have a local version of it. In the next newscast. So for all the people watching Oprah saying, if you're interested in this topic, Walden Kirsch is going to explain how it works at OHSU or something like that.
Exactly. Yep. Remember that. Yeah.
We seriously called them the Oprah story.
Yep.
And none of us liked doing them because
no, all of us hated.
They were manufactured. We were only doing it because that was on her that day.
They were contrived. Yeah.
And I thought that when you got assigned one once, you did it begrudgingly, but you did it all MOS without your voice and a track.
Oh, that's true. I didn't want my name on there. Yeah, that sounds familiar. Yeah.
And again, that's a creative way to get around it. But I don't think that they were happy with that decision.
I'm sure not. I was pretty darn good at making news directors less than happy with me, but there we go. I survived.
Wow.
There was a wacky one, speaking of which, I remember once, I don't recall who it was, that assigned me to go do a story on Portland's murder rate going through the roof. And I said, well, wait a minute, it's actually not. It's actually going down. They said, no, it's going up. Murder rate's going up. I said, well, no, actually, look at the FBI numbers. The murder rate's going down. He said, no, it's going up. So I said, all right, shit, I'll go to the story. And so I did MOS, actually. I stopped a bunch of people downtown and say, show me with your hands, with your arm, which way you think the murder rate is going up. So I got a bunch of MOS, everyone's going, and then I stand up, close in, I said, actually, you know what? This is what's going on with the murder rate. That's all. And I closed the story. And
you had stats to back it up.
Oh, of course. Oh yeah, I had the numbers. That also didn't endear me to the guy who'd assigned me to go to the store and the murder rate going up.
Getting back to those morning conversations, I think you and I had a lot of conversations about numbers and statistics and how journalism, we're not really good at giving great perspective to numbers.
Numeracy is the term. Yeah.
And I remember, I think there was a story that, traffic accidents at a certain intersection had gone up by, 500%.
Yeah.
And over a year, and the actual, the statistic was there were 2 one year and there were 10 now.
Yeah.
500%.
Right.
But I mean,
There's another one like that. Now that you mention it, Carl, this is a wacky one. Everybody, this would have been in the 90s sometime. There was some national report that came out that said Oregon's roads were the worst in the country by far, the worst, bar none. I thought, that's weird. Does that kind of jibe with our experience? Like we were like way worse than the worst state in the country, and everybody's all over it. And I thought that just doesn't really make sense. It doesn't seem like reality. So, I mean, I made a couple perfunctory calls to like the National Transportation Highway Administration, whoever's back east who assembled these stats. And it turned out once they found the guy, the low-level peon who put together the spreadsheet, they just simply read across the chart wrong, and Oregon got confused in Nebraska or something. Yeah, it was just wrong. Somebody read a chart wrong. So in fact, Oregon's not the worst roads in the country. It was somewhere right in the middle. But somebody had just not applied common sense to some numbers.
I had a similar story. There was a national report from some group that child welfare and Oregon was way down.
Yeah.
You know, they judged it on free meals at schools and daycare opportunities and all this kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And we were below. It was Portland. It wasn't Oregon. It was Portland.
Yeah.
And we were below metropolises like Detroit and
right.
things. And it just didn't make sense to me.
Right.
And I did some calling around and some checking.
Yeah.
And I actually checked with the authors of the report.
Yeah.
And I said, these are our statistics. What do you, and they go, yeah, we made a mess. You know, we didn't do that right. And here they're having this national press conference about this stuff.
Yeah,
and then I went to I'd been assigned the story.
Yeah.
And I went to the producer. I said, here are the statistics. It's not right. And I just talked to the people and they admit that they'd made a mistake. And the answer I got was, I've been assigned a full story, right?
Right.
Okay, just make it a VO bite.
So for our non-TV audience, VO bite is a shorter story. It's not a story that is a reporter narration and a stand-up and a track. It's a short story.
Yeah. It's wrong,
but still report it.
But
Just report it a little bit less, but still report it.
So the story I did was, they put out this report and they admit they made a mistake.
Oh, good. You gave it the right top, the right lead, right?
You got a great opportunity when you left KGW. Were you leaving because you were done with TV news, or were you leaving because of what came to you when you went?
It's a good question. So I mean, I'd done the TV thing for 17 years. I mean, I had a blast. It was a great job. I mean, I was basically looked at as having paid to have fun, despite the occasional boss problem. I was paid to have fun. I mean, I had a great gig. But at the same time, I've been doing it for 17 years, and I just thought it was time to try something different. And I could do a pretty darn serviceable job 5 days a week, and so on and so on. So anyway, this was right around the time of the internet, the internet bubble inflating, and everything was going crazy. So I thought, let's try something different. And so I started looking around real quietly and talked to a number of little companies around town, and had interviews and so on. And then my friend Larry Shoup, who we both know, had actually gone over to Intel 6 months or so previously, and he really persuaded me, hey, this is a good opportunity to come run Intel's worldwide news organization. So even though I've been looking at other little companies, and I thought, well, I'll go to Intel for a year or so and then move on. Obviously, it didn't work out that way. But I got a really good job, and I'm still a reporter. I'm still a journalist. Obviously, I work in a corporate environment instead of for a news outlet. But I'm still telling stories, covering the technology world. I'm actually become a photographer as well as a reporter, and I've got a great gig. I mean, I travel all over the world and tell technology stories. I was in Africa and Israel not long ago, and so I'm very lucky, and Intel treats me very nicely.
Do you piss off your bosses a little less than you did in?
Actually, yes, I do, because unlike in the news business, the people I work with, in fact, my boss is a former editor of the Oregonian, a great guy named Jerry Casey. Got a very good relationship with him. My previous boss is a great lady, Jan Dunham, Jack Oman's ex. And so I've had a whole succession of really good bosses who really in truth have been more partners and friends than, managers and bosses. So it's a very good working relationship I have with both my peers and my nominal managers and bosses who were really partners more than anything else. Yeah.
So you're in charge of basically the in-house.
Yeah. So Intel has 100,000 employees around the world, and Intel's got a PR function, but also Intel runs for our 100,000 employees around the world a news site, online news site. So myself and a bunch of other folks, some of whom got journalism experience, like like Jerry Casey, and we used to have a fellow who work with us who was National Public Radio reporter. We run a newsroom, we run a news organization, and we cover the tech industry, we cover Intel in its various incarnations, we cover the competition, we cover where things are going for the tech industry, and we run it as a news organization. We have news meetings every other day, and I crank stories out, and I got deadlines. It's the same thing, just a little different environment. An audience that's predominantly our 100,000 employees around the world, but a lot of the stuff which I produce also gets moved out externally as well. So I get an external audience as well, which is kind of important to me.
And I think in some of our conversations, you've been working from home for a little while, but obviously working from home almost all the time now, right?
Yeah. Intel has told everybody who's not in a bunny suit, not in the factory making chips, stay at home. So yes, I've been working at home since June, plus or minus, and I'm looking forward to going back to work. I miss the collegiality and the energy of being in a workplace. Yeah.
But you still have that little foot into the world of news because you're married to Marilyn Deutsch, who has been reporting at Channel 12 for more than 25 years.
Since Dirt. Yep, she's been there for a long time.
She gets to come home and tell you well, she's also working from home too, but
yeah. No, she goes to work. No, Marilyn goes to work every day. She's up at dark 30 at 3, and she's out the door, and she's out with crew covering, live shots and doing stories, and then comes back in around 11 o'clock or so and gets some sleep, and then does the same thing the next day. So, yep.
So you still get the stories of this happened in the newsroom? And...
Correct. I do, which is fun.
Just lastly, wrapping up here, it hurts me so much to hear the term fake news, having been a journalist.
Yes.
And I was not an investigative journalist. I wasn't doing some of the stories that,
Yeah, but you took your job seriously. We all took our job seriously.
I was a journalist, and I always hoped that I was supportive of that part of our job, which is the most important part of our job. And to go through the last few years of people not trusting.
It's terrible. It's awful.
It pains me, and I don't know how we can get back to a point. I mean, we should always look at some journalism with skepticism and with an open mind, with a critical thought.
Sure.
But dang, it's been a rough few years.
Well, also just the whole, and it's one of the big lies, the big lie that somehow journalists, capital J journalists, have some kind of a conspiracy or a effort to band together and do bad things. It's just so damaging to our system. I mean, journalists like doctors or lawyers or carpenters or dishwashers have, some are good, some are better than others, obviously. But the idea that the journalists would somehow conspire to do damage to other people in unison, it's damaging, and we know who's caused that, and it's really sad. I agree. Hopefully we'll recover.
Yeah. Well, if the information that's truth is damaging out there, then it's our job to get it out.
Well, of course, yeah. Hopefully things will turn around. But obviously, there's been a lot of damage in the last 4 years to the institution of the press, which our new president has said explicitly is a really important part of our system.
Don't you love his press secretary? I don't know if you've seen it. It's just
Jen Psaki,
updates that happened every day. With truth and class and
what a concept. Yeah. What a concept.
Yeah. I think part of the problem is I don't think everybody is adept at watching and realizing the difference between what is journalism and what is opinion and conversation and analysis.
Yeah, that's fair.
And I think people, obviously it's not going to go away because it's lucrative for those network stations that can have a panel of 4 or 5 people.
Yeah.
But we need a general lesson in determining, okay, you can listen to that. That's opinion, one side or the other. But the journalism that it's based on, that from the Washington Post and the New York Times. And I look at some of those White House reporters, and as soon as they say, I have sources saying X, Y, and Z, and it jives with what else we're learning. I mean, I know what that means. I mean, I know that's journalism. And I trust those people because I've been there and you've been there.
Yeah.
That's journalism. It's not an opinion from a pontificator or from a talking head. And it's so hard for most people to pick out X and Y. Yeah,
you're right. It's interesting you say, Carl, because I think actually there's been a munging especially among broadcasters, less so among print people, of news and opinion, where a network is seen as being left-leaning or right-leaning because they tend to have opinion offerers, pundits who are left or right. So that's sort of, in the public's eye, bleeds into the news side. And but we know, for example, that Fox, for example, has produced a number of critical stories, and same thing on the other side of the spectrum. But the broadcasters have become sort of gotten into the opinion business more than they used to be in a generation ago or so, and that probably hasn't helped.
Yeah. Well, those were the good old days, which is our podcast, PDX Media Good Old Days. Walden, thanks for taking the time, my friend.
It's been a pleasure.
I value your, we don't see each other as much as we used to, but I really value our time together. I learned a lot from you.
Likewise, Carl. Likewise.
I have the utmost respect for you and your career and your friendship.
Well, me too, Carl. Let's hoist a beer or do a coffee, social distance or other distanced or other at some point soon.
Someday soon. Thank you, Walden.
Okay, good. Thank you, Carl. Good to talk to you.